All right, guys. Well, here we are, next day. Had a pretty wild night last night. Not wild like in the party sense, wild in the what the fuck, I can't believe that actually happened sense. That tends to happen to me pretty often. But last night was pretty crazy. We ended up staying in this really, really weird town and stayed at this hotel. Some crazy shit went down last night. But anyway, you know, I'm on the road, so it's always more difficult to sit down and find time to do a story right now. Karina and Nico are at the park. And this is like the first second I've had today where I could actually get a video done. So, I will save the monologue stuff for the $10 tier. I'm going to be going through and finishing storylines that I've left ignored, you know, or like loose ends, not tied up. On all of them: Henry, Origins, Shaky Jake, Psychedelics, Naked Girl, even Sex Files, but Sex File Adult Edition for all those people who are like, you're weird. Jeez, a story. They happen to me. I'm not telling stories about other people. I guess other people are involved. There is a lot of masturbation. Do the Masturbation Chronicles too. But this particular story is going to be 4th of July, which I'd started, and it's not like a super long series. It's like probably like 4 or 5 videos. It's probably be like a 45-minute long video without the introduction. And I think that maybe there's a video or 2 left in the series. Then we'll go back to the Origins, then we'll do Henry, and I'll do the various other things for the upper tiers. Thank you guys for sticking with me and understanding that I need this time to heal, which is what I've been doing. I've been focusing on my family, on myself, on the things that are most important. But I do realize that I have an obligation to you guys, and I do appreciate you. So let's get right into the story. Last time that we left off, I'm in New York because I'd met this businesswoman that I found out later was like a crackhead. And she came out to Santa Barbara. She fucked me in some hotel, left me there. And then I needed, you know, I didn't actually need anything. The reason I got a hold of her in the first place was because I needed money. And she said that she'd take me, if I went out to dinner with her, that she'd send me money. So I started selling dope out in Santa Barbara for a little bit. It wasn't a lot. I was selling like a half piece, which is like 12.5 grams. But compared to what I'd been doing before that, that was like a huge, like I really felt like I'd done something in life. I'd be like, huh, you went to college? So what? I'm selling half pieces. I'm doing way better than you. No, I live with my parents. So what? I was like 20 at the time that this took place, 19 or 20, something like that. But she ends up getting a hold of me and having me come out to New York to spend 4th of July with her. I know that she's married, or that's at least what I suspected. And then when I get out there, I got caught beating off in her building. This really happened. It's not a joke. I didn't make the thing up. This actually happened to me. And I got kicked out of her building early in the morning. My cell phone was about to die. I was smart enough to call Jeff and have him save some phone numbers of people that I knew that lived in New York. And then I went out trying to score. I ended up meeting up with this really weird guy that would eventually become Caspa and Wasting Talent. Even though Caspa in that book is more like, I don't know, a wigger, I guess is what we would call that. And this guy was like a poser punk rock guy, but like same concept. Both people that I think were trying a little too hard to be something that they weren't. This guy had fishnet stockings. He had the little skeleton earring thing on. And he went and he got me a pill that he said had heroin in it. Now at 19, I don't know if it was my naivety, because at 19, you just want to believe people. You're like, of course they put heroin in this pill. That sounds completely believable. You know, now at this age, I'm much more jaded, and I don't believe shit like that. Or I just know better. I know that they don't put heroin in pills. But I didn't know about Suboxone yet. I didn't know about precipitated withdrawal. I didn't know about what naloxone was. I didn't know what these various drugs did, and I didn't know that you could even be put into precipitated withdrawal. That wasn't a thing. The reason that's a thing right now in 2021 is because Suboxone has become such a popular maintenance drug and detox drug. So a lot of people are familiar with Suboxone now, and a lot of people take it, and a lot of people use it to come off heroin themselves at home. And so, after you stop doing heroin, you have to wait a good 12, 15, some people say 24 hours. I've always been able to do it in about 15, 16 hours without incident. But back then, I didn't know about any of that stuff. And he gives me this pill, I take it, and it sends me into what I know now to be precipitated withdrawal. Back in that time period, I didn't know what that was. So when he gave it to me, I really thought that he had given me some sort of like hallucinogenic drug, or I don't know, maybe even like a date rape drug. I'd like watch all these after school specials on HBO where like always like have the jock in the Letterman jacket being like, you see this? This is a Rufinol. We're gonna rape a chick with this. Get in. Like 4 dudes pile into a Corvette. They're like, yeah, fucking hate women. I love raping. And they'd like peel off. And then like some like narrator would come on talking about the dangers of date rape. And I'd always be like eating pop. I'd be like, I never want to be like those fucking losers. I love women. But I knew that from watching stuff like that, seriously, I knew that it was a thing. I knew that people gave people drugs so that they could rape them. The last thing that I wanted to do was get raped, especially in the state that I was in. I felt like I want to say I felt like it was like being on acid to some degree. Not the visuals, not the hallucinations, more this like very dirty like body high that you get from LSD. That's what precipitated withdrawal feels like, because it's so bad. I mean, your pupils swell up, so you've got these big saucery pupils. It's almost like this very heightened sense of anxiety, panic. I say it a lot, like in a horror movie when it goes like, wah, wah, wah. Imagine that, but just looping. That's precipitated withdrawal. You're like, oh, this is chill. Yeah, whatever. I'm just going to ride it out. No, nobody ever says that. When you're in precipitated withdrawal, it's regular withdrawal, but it's amplified by like 1,000. It's really scary. I don't know if you guys remember the story. I don't know. I hope that I'm not repeating myself when I say this, but because sometimes I forget if I told you guys this story or if I tell Karina a lot of stuff. But there's this one time, and I think I have told this story, the time that I'm like remembering telling you guys this recently, that time that my wife had gone to Denver, and she's like, don't get strung out. I was like, of course not, babe. As soon as she left, I like called, I was like, hey, yeah, connection? Yeah, it's Ryan. Yeah, I'm trying to get strung out right now. Yeah, I got $200. Cool. Yeah, I'll meet you at the park. By the time she came back, I was full-blown strung out again, and her son had a Christmas recital the next day. He was going to be singing like all these like Hawaiian Christmas songs, like Aloha and Christmas or whatever, like all these weird Hawaiian-themed Christmas songs. Anyway, she came back. I missed picking her up at the airport, and I had done the last of my dope. I was trying to play it off like I wasn't strung out, but I had acne, all the telltale signs that I was using. I had track marks. There was like burnt little blotches all over the counter because of the carbon from burning the bottom of a spoon, and I just get all lazy and put it on the counter. So it was obvious. All of the old signs were there. Q-tips were ripped apart because I'd used the cottons. You better not be using. You are such a drug addict. You better not be fucking using. I'm like, dude, I'm not using. And I went to sleep. I remember I took a Xanax bar, and I was like, whatever. I'll wake up tomorrow. I'll do a sub so that I can go to this recital, because she was adamant that I don't miss the goddamn recital. next morning, usually I would walk her kid to school. It was only a few blocks away. But that particular morning, I woke up and I was just in a pool of sweat. Just puddled. It was literally like, you could like slap the sheet and it would like make farting noises. That's how much sweat and perspiration was like coming off of my body. And she's like, I bet you're not gonna walk him to school, are you? And I was like, oh, I'm constipated. I need to stay here and try to have a bowel movement. She's like, you don't even talk like that, bowel movement. What the fuck is wrong with you? I'm like, And she ended up leaving to take him to school. Now, when she left, I knew that I had this like brief window, to go do my Suboxone. Now, back in that time, I didn't know as much about Suboxone. I didn't know that the buprenorphine, which gives you the precipitated withdrawal, but also naloxone intensifies that precipitated withdrawal if you inject it. You know, the whole point of Suboxone is they put buprenorphine with naloxone and they like just threw the naloxone in so that they could market it differently than Subutex because they were competitors. And it's supposed to make it so you can't inject it. You know, it's supposed to make it abuse proof, which isn't true. I've shot Suboxone thousands of times without incident. But if you're within that little window, like we're talking about, like I hadn't waited long enough. I didn't wait 15 hours to do the Suboxone. So anyway, I ended up making up a shot. You know, you just put a strip in a spoon and add water and it liquefies, stir it up with the plunger. So I did that, right? And I cooked up the shot, and I remember to this day, it was this vein that ran over the ball of my ankle. Stuck the needle in, pulled the plunger back, blood blossoms into the syringe. I'm like, all right, I'm in, cool. I'm going to aloha, and I'm like about to press it down. And as soon as the plunger starts going down and I start injecting the Suboxone into my bloodstream, normally you feel this warmth, like these pins and needles. This time, it was the complete opposite. It was like cold, rusty nails coursing through. I felt it going up my ankle, just crawling up my body. I was like, no! I knew right away that what had happened. I knew that I was going into precipitated withdrawal, and it was fucking nightmarish. I got butt naked. I was like running around the apartment, puking everywhere. I was like, shit was like spewing out of my asshole. It looked absurd. It looked like some sort of like obscene cartoon or something. There was literally trails of my shit everywhere. It looked like melted creamy peanut butter. And then I got in bed and I was just like thrashing. I looked like the Exorcist girl. And my ex-wife was like, you have 15 minutes to get ready for the Christmas recital. And I don't know if you've ever been in precipitated withdrawal, but let me tell you, that was one of the hardest couple hours of my life. Precipitated withdrawal lasts like 4 to 5 hours. 4, 5, 6 hours. She made me go to this recital while I was in I was like shivering, like looking at other parents. They probably thought I was like some rabid sex freak or something. Like, they'd all heard like rumors about me that I was like some perverted author guy. It was horrible. Anyway, the reason I told you that is that particular time, yes, precipitated withdrawal is very debilitating, but that particular time when I was in the East Coast, at least the time where I went to the Christmas recital, I knew what I was dealing with. I knew that I was in precipitated withdrawal, and I knew why I was feeling the way that I was feeling. The time in New York, I didn't know anybody. I didn't have a phone. I tried to tell a cop that some dude tried to drug me because in my head, I legitimately thought this guy was trying to kill me. And nobody cared. So here I am just like hobbling down the street, projectile vomiting everywhere. And I have nothing to puke up. I'm a junkie at that point. You know, I may have eaten like a can of SpaghettiOs like 3 days before that. But by this point, the only thing that's coming up is acidic bile, and it burns. And in New York, the streets are so crowded to begin with, everybody's just looking at me, you know, and they're like kind of like, you'd see like business guys like kind of juke and jive to get away from me because I'm like leaned over, I'm like, bleh! it was outrageous. It was ridiculous. It was like I was exaggerating it, but I was really puking. And finally, I get to this, like, I don't even know how to describe it. I guess, like, it's like the front of a newsstand or something. So there's this awning. And I remember because the sun was like beating on me and it was making me feel more sick. It was like boiling my blood. I think because I was just like felt these like intense heat rushes anyway from being in precipitated withdrawal. And I get under this awning. It's like at a I guess a newspaper stand, or like, yeah, a place where they sell like magazines and newspapers, but there's an awning. It's like a little storefront. And there's like this little stack of newspapers, and I just like curled up. I had vomit all over me, by the way. I had like this big ass stain like right in my chest. And it was the kind of thing where it was like, oh, that could be sweat. Oh, there's chunks on it. That's definitely vomit. You could tell that it was puke. It was not left open for interpretation. I had like a big ass pile of vomit just chilling on like the center of my shirt. And I crawled up like beneath this little stack of newspapers, and I just start shivering because it makes you really hot, really cold, really hot, really cold. And I had gotten out of the sun. So being out of the sun now I was dealing with the other extreme side of that spectrum. I was like freezing cold. Felt like I jumped in the ocean like 6 a.m, and I was just like almost like in shock at how cold I was. And I'm sitting there shivering. Now, there's a guy that works at this newsstand. He's like this overweight guy with a ponytail. He's got headphones on, like, you know, the old kind of headphones with like the cloth on them, like, you know, like the old Sony like headphones you'd have on like a Discman. And he kind of like looks at me, shakes his head, and then just keeps listening to music and like flipping through a Rolling Stone or whatever he was doing. I remember thinking, I was like, God, that's how shot out New York is. Like, Scott, I'm like, he must be used to shit like this. Just some junkie shivering like by a stack of newspapers, and he didn't do anything about it. So I stayed there for, I don't know, a good hour, a good 2 hours. I could like probably compare it to being seasick. Like when you're really seasick, I don't know if any of you guys have ever had ocean sickness or seasickness, motion sickness. Oh, did I say ocean sickness? Yeah, I'm ocean sick. No, I don't know. I can't do nothing today, man. I'm motion sick as all fuck. All right, catch you next time, man. Motion sickness is what I meant to say. There's nothing you can really do to get it to stop, but like if you concentrate on nothing. And if you've been motion sickness on a boat, sick like that, you know what I'm talking about. You can like focus on something, like focus on not thinking, and you get to this place where your brain's just kind of shut off, and you're just kind of like physically rocking back and forth trying to pacify the symptoms, right? Trying to like feel better. And that's what I did. And probably a couple hours went by like that. This guy didn't bug me that ran this stand or whatever it was, and I got to a place where I felt, like I said, it takes like 4 or 5 hours to stop the precipitated withdrawal. And I heard if you do like more heroin or you do more buprenorphine, you can like push the precipitated withdrawal out. But it took a few hours, and whatever the case was, I finally like had the strength to get up, you know, walk around. And my plan was to try to link up with somebody that I'd met at that program that I was at in Worcester, because a lot of those guys lived in New York. Those are the phone numbers that I had Jeff write down. So I walk like through the street. I remember like the sun was like really stinging my eyes. I felt really sick. And people were looking at me. I was getting bad looks because I had vomit all over me and I just looked like a complete dirtbag. Also, back then I had a lot of acne. My hair was probably like super disheveled. I probably just looked like, there's nothing else I could look like besides the complete scumbag drug addict, which is what I was at that time. So I like made it down the street and I like make it back to this park. Same park that I had originally seen Caspa at, or whatever the fuck the guy's name was. I don't even think we gave him a name, but that guy with the fishnet stockings. There's like all these like birds and shit like by these drinking fountains. And I went up to use the drinking fountain and they all just like flew away like as I approached. Like I like scared them. And I remember it like really startled me. Like it was like hundreds of birds just like, Wah! And they like took off. I was like, oh my God, it felt so medieval at this point. And I go up to the drinking fountain and I just start washing myself. And not to get too graphic, but like, you know, various times in jail and prison, I'd have to do bird baths. Like if you're in solitary confinement, if you're in the hole, and you like use the sink to wash parts of your body that stink. Your armpits, your balls, your butthole. I was washing off my shirt, so I was like just trying to get the vomit off. But I felt like since I was already doing it, and I'd been to county jail plenty of times at that point, so like I was well aware of how bird baths worked. So I just started washing myself. Now this is in a pretty crowded park. Like I'm like, there's no soap or anything. I'm just like getting water and like putting it into my crotch and like kind of rubbing myself. I mean, I look like a complete pervert probably. Like it didn't look like I was washing. It probably looked like I was just playing with myself at this park. I do that for a little bit, and when I feel that I'm like decently washed, I walk away, and there's like all these different picnic tables. There's like some guys playing chess and stuff, and I go sit down, you know, try to like observe the park and try to figure out what my next move is. I end up spotting couple skater kids, and you know, skater kids on the East Coast have a similar attitude as skater kids on the West Coast. That's like one universal language that I spoke. And I go up to these skaters. I'm like completely doused in water from where I was washing myself. And I go up to them and I introduce myself, and by this point I'm feeling well enough where I can like communicate with somebody else like I'm like a human being. It's not like how it was before, you know, where I'm like so twacked out on precipitated withdrawal that I can't even communicate. And I explain my situation. You know, of course I change it a little bit. I don't go into the fact that I'm strung out, because they didn't look like those kind of kids. This just looks like a couple kids that are probably my age, 19 years old, skater kids. They don't look like druggies though. And I was like, hey, you know, I got in a fight with this girl that I've been staying with. I'm from the West Coast and my cell phone's dead. I have no way of charging it. You think that I can use your phone? Call my friend. He has some phone numbers written. I'm really in a bad situation. I'm stranded out here. And they were cool with it. They didn't say a lot. They're just like, you know, I think if I hadn't gone and washed myself off, if I had still had vomit caked all over me, and if I still smelled as rancid as I did, they probably wouldn't have been willing to help me. But I just looked like some guy that had been sitting in the sun too long. You know, I looked like I was sweating or whatever. So I called Jeff. I kind of explained to him what the situation was. Jeff thought that the guy had given me acid or something. I'm like explaining this in front of these two kids too, but it didn't even matter. I was just like happy to be talking to Jeff at the time. So he ends up giving me these phone numbers. I think one of the kids had like a pencil or something, or a pen. Whatever the case was, we like wrote the numbers down. And I start calling the various people that I had phone numbers, I had contacts with on the East Coast. Now, if you remember from, I think in one of the videos I went back and I explained like the backstories of these different people that I knew. But there's like 3 people that I was kind of friends with when I was at that program out in Worcester, and I know that these particular people had moved out to New York. And I didn't know which borough they were in, but I thought that, and I don't remember what name I'd given him in the backstory, but his name was Eric. And Eric, just to briefly give you the background, he's the guy that was a male model He was like very weird. He had like this very weird chiseled face. He's the one that had sex with Nina, the other weird girl there. They were just like matter of fact, like, yeah, you know, yeah, we had sex. Yeah, no, Nina and I, yeah, we had intercourse. Yeah, it was all right. It was pretty good. And then Nina would be like, yeah, I had sex with Eric. It was all right. You know, it's like really, they were like very weird and matter of fact about it. But that particular guy was a drug dealer when I was at that program. And he was like the kind of guy that acted like he wasn't selling drugs, but he was. He always acted like he had the connections to get them, but then like you'd give him the money and he'd just like walk into his room and like come out and give you the drugs. So it became pretty obvious that he was the connection and that he was just trying to pretend like he wasn't because he didn't want to get in trouble, which is smart on him. Hold on. I don't know why of all the options of people that I had that I decided to call him. He was probably out of all those people the guy that I knew the least. You know, I was probably the least close with this particular guy, but I was still feeling horrible, you know, from the precipitated withdrawal. And I think maybe the reason that I'd called him was because he was in Manhattan. I think I knew that he was in Manhattan. This is the era of MySpace. So it was like social media was just starting. And I do think that I knew that he was in the same area as me. Whatever the case was, I gave him a call. Just as weird as I remember him, he picks up. He's like, hello? I'm like, Eric? He's like, yeah. Who's this? I'm like, hey, this is Ryan Leone. I went to Dynamy with you. He's like, the heroin addicted guy? I said, yeah, that's me. Hey, Eric, how are you? He's like, are you still addicted to heroin? I was like, yeah, are you still a fucking possible serial killer, you weirdo? He was like, always like monotone. This guy was so weird. And it was like, he wasn't joking with the things that he's saying too. It's like everything he said was just like completely like monotoned and lacking any personality at all. I was like, yeah, I'm still addicted to heroin. He's like, that sucks. I was like, yeah, what have you been doing? He's like, DJing for parties with women. I was like, oh, you like women? He's like, yeah, kind of. Do you? I was like, I like them a lot. He's like, that's cool. Lots of people do. I'm like looking at these skater kids that I'm with. Like, I feel weird just like being on the other end of a situation with, or on the other side of a conversation with such a weird person. And I was like, well, look, Eric, I'm stuck in Manhattan right now. I'm at this party. He's like, oh, do you want to stay here? You need a place to stay? I was like, yeah. I was like, is that cool? Do you live alone? Do you have a girlfriend? He's like, I live with Will. You remember Will Spider? And I was like, Will? We'll get back to Will in a second. I couldn't believe he was living with that guy of all people, right? And I was like, yeah, man, I need somewhere to stay, you know. And he's like, all right, well, I'm gonna give you directions to my building, and you can come stay here for a day or two. He's like, but you can't stay here longer than that because I DJ and I like to sleep before I DJ. And when I have guests over, I don't sleep. And then when I try to DJ, I'm DJing sleepless. And sleepless DJing is usually not as good as it when I have sleep. I was like, oh, yeah, totally, man. You sound the same. I can't wait to see you. I miss you. He's like, yeah, I miss you too. All right, I'll see you later. So he gave me directions to his place. And now I actually had somewhere to go. I had no idea how to get back to Becky's house, right? The sister, what did I call, was it Kelly? Was that the name that we had given the businesswoman? Her sister's name was Becky. I had no idea how to get back to their buildings. This was like really the only option that I had. So I had been sick like half a day at that point. Spent some time in the park. I'd cleaned myself up. I got on the phone. The very first person that I called was Eric, and he said that I could come stay with him. So it was like already things were looking up. Now again, back when I had first met him, just a couple years before that. See, that's the thing. Not too much time had passed, but when you're 19 years old, you know, a year seems like a really long time. When you're 35, 36 years old, a year doesn't seem like shit anymore, especially when you've done years in prison. But back then, just a year, it seemed like a lot of time had passed. But back when I was at Dynamy, I've explained this before, you know, I'd say that when I first got there, I had a lot of friends and I was popular there. And I was very much like in the social scene. Went to all the parties. You know, my girlfriend, Kate, was considered one of the hottest girls there at the time. So like, usually when you date a hot girl and you're in some sort of like social setting like that, social scene, you're usually accepted because everyone just wants to fuck your chick. They're like, yeah, you're cool. Come on over. Hopefully you get wasted or take some Xanax bars, pass out, we can fuck Kate. Like, oh yeah, good joke. And that's just how it went. So what happened though is as I got into heroin at Dynamy, everybody started turning on me. Now Eric was one of those people that was never like one of my good friends there, but he started distancing himself from me when I started getting really bad. It wasn't just the heroin. That's not the reason that everybody turned on me. It was also the fact that I had been kicked out of the program and Kate was like harboring me as like a fugitive. And they had made it clear that if she was caught hiding me in there, that she was going to get kicked out too. So a lot of people didn't want to get kicked out of the program. So a lot of people just started distancing themselves from me at that point. And I remember like a couple times I was like down and out and I'd gone to Eric like crying to him. I'd be like, oh, I'm so strung out. Can I borrow some money? And he'd give me $50. He'd be like, here's 50. I'm like, oh, thanks. He never really lectured me. And I guess the point of what I'm saying is he was one of the people that didn't quite turn on me. Right? Like everybody else seemed to just like give up or like not want anything to do with me. Eric seemed to be more neutral. Even I'd say a step above that. He was even willing to help me like at times where I was like at rock bottom, didn't have any money, lend me money so I could go get well, shit like that. Now Will, and this guy that apparently he was living with, because that's what he had told me on the phone, there's this guy named Will. I don't know if you guys remember who he is from the Boston series or if I had even covered him, but one of the weirder people at Dynamy was this guy, Will, right? I got in 2 fights while I was in Dynamy. The first one was with this guy. He was my friend Luke. So the guy Luke that was part of the Albuquerque series, who had like the rich dad with like the playmate girlfriend. His dad was like the crypt keeper, like 80 years old, and kicked me out of his house because I had tattoos. If you remember that guy Luke lived in a house on Elm Street. I remember that because Nightmare on Elm Street. But he lived at this house on Elm Street and he had like 2 or 3 roommates, and they were all like total squares, right? They were all weirdos. And this one guy had left porno magazines in the bathroom. And he left it spread open. It was like just all these hardcore like gangbang scenes, whatever. But then he also had pictures of like his 5 and 6-year-old nieces laid out with the porn magazines. Now, Luke called him out on it. Luke, like, had gone in the bathroom and found this, and he was like, what the fuck? He's like, what's up with this? And he's like, it's just what I'm into, man, okay? I wasn't there when that happened. So, people talked about it. I forget where I was. I might have been partying in New York that weekend. I think I was. I think I was with Kate, and we were partying in New York. And I came back. I was a scrawny little 18-year-old kid. But somebody told me that story. I don't even remember what this guy's name was. I think it was like Devin or something. I think that's what his name was. And they're like, yeah, did you hear about Devin? I think he's a child molester. And I was like, huh? What do you mean? Somebody told me that story. I was like, oh, hell no. And so maybe that night or a night or two later, we were partying at this college party away from any of the houses that we lived at. My guy Devin was there, and I was all drunk. I walked up to him. He's like, what's up, Ryan? Before he could say anything, I just sucker punched. I just dope fiended him. Bah! I was like, you fucking sicko. Nah. Fucking, this guy's a child molester. I was like yelling it, and everybody was like, oh my God. All these college kids were like blowing lifeguard whistles, like, poo, poo, security. People were like really freaked out that I beat this. I didn't even beat him up. I just hit him really hard. And I was like, don't ever fucking show your face here again, you weirdo. And he didn't. He left. He never showed up again. He left the program, never to be heard of, just because I sucker punched him once. But I also made a big scene and was like pointing at him, saying he was a child molester. Then I actually got kicked out of that party. These like frat guys were like, hey man, no beating up child molesters at our party. I was like, what are you saying? He's a child molester. They're like, so? We're in college. It's time to experiment. We don't even know who we are yet. I'm like, wow. Those guys are probably chomos too. So that was the first fight I got in. Now the second fight, there was this guy named Will. And this is important because this has a big part to do with this story, right? Will was like this really bad pathological liar. It's kind of like in Napoleon Dynamite, where he's like, I told you I've been, hunting for wild wolverines with my uncle again, or whatever he would say. This guy, Will, I just did not like from the get-go because he would say outrageous stuff. He's like, yeah, I'm a Latin king. It's like this like dorky white dude with these like super crazy like Coke bottle glasses. I'm like, you're in a gang? He's like, well, nobody knows me as Will in my gang. My street name is Spider. And I was like, street name? Spider. It's like, this guy's a fucking straight full of shit. He's like, no. He's like, it's what everybody knows me for. I'm a big deal in New York. He was from New York originally. So I didn't like this guy from the get-go because he would just say these outlandish things that we all knew was bullshit. And you've probably met somebody like that more than once. Once in a while you run into somebody that just lies about every single fucking thing, and they make up these just outrageous things that are... There's no way that this guy was in a gang, and there's no way that anybody in life ever called him Spider. That was like what he wanted to be. He's like, look, and he had like a spider, he had like one of those like little, you know how at Halloween you get those rings with like the plastic black spider? He had one of those, but it was like made out of like silver. It's like, yeah, this is what they gave me. The Latin kings. Yeah, when they ringed me, I'm like, they ringed you? He's like, yeah, when you're a Latin king, they ring you. If you put in enough work. It was really weird. I think Death on 23andMe just had some like weird compulsive liar guy like this on, said that he was like half Latin king, half whatever. I don't know. I saw it on Instagram. I was like, wow, that sounds like Will. So anyway, I kind of made it known from the get-go that I wasn't cool with this guy, and I didn't like this guy, and I didn't like that. Like, I wouldn't allow him, he couldn't come over to my place. I was like, don't let Spider over here. Ever since he said the Spider thing, that's all I would call him. right? Like he like was just kind of ridiculed by me and my friends. So I didn't see him that often. Now one day, now I'm dating Kate at the time. She lives in this house with like these 3 other girls. Remember when I had gotten kicked out, I used to like watch chick flicks with them. I'd be like the only guy there. I'd be like crying with them. I'd be like, don't tell anybody about this. They're like, okay. And then Kate and I would like retreat into her room and have sex. Those were the good old days. But anyway, this one day I go over to Kate's house. I think I had gone to my little like internship job at at the public access channel. And I get there and she's crying. And this is my first love. I love this girl like more than anything. To see her crying pained me. I was like, baby, why are you crying? And she's like, oh, Will climbed in our window and stole a steak. I was like, what do you mean Will crawled in your... The fucking spider guy? Fucking doing weird spider shit? Crawling through windows, stealing fucking carne asada? What the fuck, dude? It's like a drug deal going on right now. That's funny. Guy just like handed some guy some money. It's a paisa. Look at me profiling people. So anyway, I'm right in front of a police station too. Jeez. So I called Will out. Like, I was like, come on. And I like brought Kate and like all of her friends to his place. He lived with Luke. So Luke lived with Will, and he lived with that guy Devin before I sucker punched him at this party. And then he just was like ostracized from like the program. But he also lived with this guy, Will, who I called Spider. So I show up with this like mob of girls because they were all mad that the steak got stolen. And I'm like yelling, like I could have just knocked on the door, but I had to be super melodramatic. I was like, get out here, Spider, I'm gonna fucking kill you. Rah! And he like comes out, he's like, what, man? I'm like, did you steal steak from my girlfriend? He's like, yeah, but I was just joking. It was just a joke. I'm like, did you eat it? He's like, yeah, but I was hungry. That's all I had to hear. I like walked up, I was like, all right, well, we gotta fight, man. He's like, okay. He like put his hands up like this. I just started laughing because he just looks so absurd. I'm like, I'm gonna hit you. He's like, okay. I'm like, all right, I'm hitting you now. He's like, all right. I like hit him. He's like, ow. I'm like, dude, you're not making this easy. I feel like I'm beating up like an elderly person or something. He's like, you hit my ear. I'm like, I'm gonna do it again. And I hit his other ear. Bam! And by like the second time I hit him, I'm not like the kind of guy that likes hurting people. I don't like fighting. I usually just do it for attention. I hit him a couple times, I made my point, and that was that. We rarely saw Will again after that. Like, he was so scared of getting beat up, I think. So that was really the last I heard of him. Like, the last time I ever really interacted with him, I punched him a couple times in the ears, and that was that. So I thought it was very interesting that now, a year or two later, when I'm in New York in this kind of bad situation that I was in and I needed a place to stay, when I called Eric, he was staying with this guy, Spider. Eric was cool. In a very weird way. I mean, like I said, he helped me out when I was sick, and he seemed to be one of those people that didn't have a lot of judgment towards me. He kind of just like understood that I was going through addiction and didn't hold it against me. So anyway. I ended up taking a cab to Eric's house. Now, Eric lived, I don't know, 10 blocks from there. I mean, he was pretty close to where I was, coincidentally. I remember the cab fare was like $8 or $9. Like, it wasn't a big deal. And I end up getting there. And by that point, the precipitated withdrawal had kind of like run its course. But now I'm like in regular withdrawal, because that's what happens. You know, when you have a partial antagonist. Actually, I'm not going to pretend like I understand how partial antagonists and full antagonists work. But what happened is I was still dope sick. I just wasn't in like full-on amplified precipitated withdrawal. I show up at this place, and I remember I didn't have a phone or anything. So he had told me which apartment number he was in, and this place didn't have a doorman. It was just like you could just open the door from the street, take an elevator up. It was like it was definitely not as nice as the apartment complex of the girls when I had first gone out there, when I got caught jerking off. So I take this elevator up, and I'm sick, and I probably stink. Like, whatever half-ass washing that I'd done in the drinking fountain really like wasn't enough, you know, because I still like had a stench. Remember, I'm dope sick, so like my sense of smell is definitely amplified at this point. I get to the apartment. It was like, I think it's so long ago, but it might have been like on the 6th or 7th floor or something. I don't even remember. I get there and I just start knocking. Da, 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 da. Dude opens the door, and it's Will. He's in a puffer. He's in like a FUBU jacket. No bullshit. He's wearing like this like big ass puffy yellow FUBU jacket. He sees me, he's like, "Oh, hey Ryan." I was like, "Hey Spider." He's like, "Don't call me that anymore." I was like, "Well, what's your name?" He's like, "Will." I was like, "What's your street name?" He's like, "I'm not in no gang no more." He's like, "Eric told me you'd be coming by. We cool?" I'm like, "Yeah, we're cool." Shook hands. He's like, "All right, cool. Well, Eric's not here right now. He went grocery shopping because he knew that you were coming, so he wanted to get some stuff. So it's just gonna be me and you for a while." I'm like, "Okay." It's like, can I get you anything? You want a drink or something?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll have a drink." He's like, "You want a beer?" It's like, "Sure." So I go and I sit on this couch. Now I'm looking, and this is like, although the apartment building wasn't very nice, this was actually a pretty nice apartment once I got inside of it. It was like, I think like a 3-bedroom or something, and it was 2 stories. So it was like, there was like a spiraling staircase, and then there was like this nice living room, and there was like a bedroom, there was a kitchen, there's a bedroom, and then if I remember correctly, there's 2 bedrooms upstairs. That's where they lived, right? So I sat down on this couch in the living room. He goes into the kitchen, he gets me a Guinness. Back in that time period, I liked drinking Guinness for some reason. I don't know, that was just like my beer of choice. I just liked the way that it tasted. So he hands me a cold Guinness in a bottle. Take like 2 sips of it and just vomit it all over his carpet. Now, they had like this like kind of like beige shag carpet, right? So when I puke it, Guinness is a dark beer, it like got all over the carpet. Will's like, "Oh man." He's like, "Man, it's fucking super not cool of you, Ryan. Eric's gonna be pissed, man. He's gonna be pissed. That's his favorite shag carpet." I'm like, "It's the only shag carpet in here." He's like, "I know that, Ryan. I'll clean it though, don't worry. I'm actually not as bad of a guy as you think. I'm sorry about the steak." I'm like, "Yeah, all right, clean it. Cool." Kind of put the Guinness like on this glass table. He's like, "Hey man, when you put bottles down in here, you put them on coasters." instantly I remember like why I don't like this guy. I didn't like this guy from the beginning, you know, just from all the shit that he used to say. And then when he stole from my girl, I really got pissed off about it. So, sit back on the couch after I puke. He comes in, he has like some sort of like, I don't know, some spray thing that gets spots off or whatever it was. And he turns on the TV. I don't remember what we were watching, but it was like, I don't know. I don't even remember. But we were watching TV, and I'm kind of sitting there just watching him clean. Kind of have my legs propped up. Feels good to be inside of an apartment, you know, after like being in like the scorching hot all day and to be in the precipitated withdrawal all day. Just felt good to like be inside, even though I really did not like this guy, Will. I was just trying to think of the positives. And now that I was actually at this house, I could charge my phone. I could figure out what was going on, you know, with these girls. Just try to figure out like what I was even doing out here in the first place. Well, Will's spraying, and I'm like, hey, Will. He's like, yeah. He's like sitting there like on his knees, lost in thought, like scrubbing this vomit that I had gotten all over the shag carpet. And I was like, hey man, you don't have any drugs, do you? He's like, wow. You know, seems like you're the kind of guy that's never gonna change, Ryan. You're still doing the same stuff you were doing a year ago. What kind of drugs are you looking for? What? I'm like, I don't know, maybe like some painkillers or something. It's like, I don't do shit like that, Ryan. Like, I got some dope though. I was like, dope? What do you mean dope? What kind of dope? He's like, I got some China White. I thought he was completely fucking with me, right? Because the last time I had seen this guy at, when I had seen him at Dynamy, he was like a dork, and he was the kind of guy that like tried to get drugs all the time, but like we'd always burn him. I think I burned him a couple times out there. I know my friend JP did, for sure. I think I may have. I don't even remember, but it doesn't matter. He's telling me that he had China White heroin, and I was like, are you just saying that to fuck with me, or? And he's like, no. Shit, there's like a kid right there. Jeez. And he's like, okay, look, Eric doesn't know that I use, and he would be super disappointed. So I can give you some, but we can't do any around him. I'm like, well, he's not here right now. He's like, yeah, but he's gonna be home any minute. I was like, well, let me just do it really quick. I was like, dude, I'm sick. Ryan, if you want me to give you any of my dope, you're gonna do it my way. All right? Let him get here. Let him see you. And then I will give you some. The fact that I didn't like this guy already, like him putting these kind of stipulations on me, was pissing me off. Like, I can't even describe, like, as sick as I felt, can't even describe like how frustrated I was that this, and also I still didn't really believe that he even had any dope, just because of how this guy was. He didn't look like a junkie. He was definitely one of the people when I was in Worcester that looked down on me for using drugs. And you see that happen all the time, you know, you see the tide turn. You see people judging you one day. They're like, ew, that guy does heroin. That's gross. Then they do heroin. They're like, this stuff feels good. I like that guy. That guy was right all along. All you other guys are gross. You see that happen all the time. It's a very cutthroat thing, you know, and people flip-flop and change positions on it very easily. But still, there was something that just didn't add up about this particular guy having it. I just didn't believe him. Especially the fact that he wouldn't give it to me right off the bat and he was putting these stipulations. So I was just annoyed. And we're like sitting there arguing about it. And he's like, you're not going to convince me. I'm the one with the dope. I have it, not you. Just like, oh my God. I was like, Will, do you want me to beat you up again? Is that what you want? I'll fucking beat you up again if you don't. How about that? You don't give me I'm going to fucking beat you up. Right as I'm saying this, front door opens and there's Eric and he has a grocery bag. And was like, hey, Eric. Eric looks at Will. He's like, hey, Will. He's like, oh, hey, Ryan. And I like, there's something off, right? There's just something like weird about this situation. Will saying that he has dope, like I don't think that he does. This guy, Eric, who would never hang out with this guy. Why are they even living together? Like that was odd as fuck to me. You know, I guess I could spend more time like going into their backstory so that you could understand more, but just take my word for it. It was a very, very weird situation. Now, of course, I'm in withdrawal at the time, so my perception of everything is probably a bit skewed, but I just knew something was off, and I was definitely right about that. And we will get into that in the next installment of the 4th of July series. Palabra.